Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Shawn Winter, who is VP of Mobility Solutions at this Descartes Systems Group. And today we're going to talk about the reality of last mile challenges. Now, the end-to-end supply chain consists of many parts, but when you look at the rise of e-commerce, particularly last year due to the pandemic, it has definitely put the spotlight on one of those parts, namely last mile delivery. So what makes last mile delivery so challenging and complex? How has the pandemic transformed this process? And what will ultimately separate the leaders from the laggards moving forward? Well, those are the key questions we're going to discuss in today's episode. And it's great to have Shawn on the program to share his insights and perspective on this topic. So Shawn, welcome to the program.
Adrian, nice to be here. Thanks so much for having me on. It's great.
So Shawn, I mean, we've had many of your colleagues there at Descartes on Talking Logistics over the years. You're a first-time guest, so like I always like to do whenever I bring someone new on the program, I'm always curious how and why they got involved with this crazy industry that we're in. So before we dive into last mile delivery, why don't you share a little bit, real brief, a little bit about how you got involved with supply chain logistics and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Descartes?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks again. I mean, we came in as part of an acquisition. ShipTrack was a product that we had within a hardware business we own, based out of the Canadian marketplace. And, to be honest with you, we supplied a lot of those handheld scanners and mobile computing products to the T&L world. A lot of our customers were transportation logistics companies, both, full truckload and couriers and so on. And back in 2012, 2011, we started, obviously promoting our services, but we found there was a ton of gaps in the marketplace. And that kind of led us down the software path to kind of complement our hardware business that we had. And proved to be very successful, obviously. And fast forward a few years, we're now part of the Descartes Systems Group as of 2020. And as far as the responsibilities go, not a lot has changed in the sense that our team is still intact, which I'm really, really proud of. We brought about 67 people over to Descartes, and the technology is all intact. In fact, we're doing nothing but growing it, and that's part of the reason why I was attracted to go over to Descartes is the worldwide presence and the growth opportunities in front of us.
Great. Well, certainly I've had the opportunity to work with Descartes for many, many years, and it's a company that's has grown not only organically, but through acquisitions, over the years, bringing in, interesting technology solutions, such as the one that you brought to the table. So let's get into now last mile. I mean, like I mentioned in my opening comments, every aspect of logistics has its own, unique challenges. I mean, what makes last mile delivery so complex and challenging?
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, last mile has always been a challenge because it's probably one of the most complicated and expensive parts of the supply chain, right? For example, when I talk about expensive, you talk about some of our customers who are now running, 1.2 to 1.5 pieces per stop. Whereas you might look at a truckload, for instance, who are delivering, pallets of products in 1 or 2 stops. So the economics of scale of economies is a lot different. I think the other problem or the challenge that the last mile have to make it really complicated is that they get incredibly high volumes, and even without 2020 and 2021 ahead of us, but normally they're stuck with a lot of high volumes with very, very little time to plan for each day. And if you look at the way we're receiving data from their customers, the timeline, they've got 3 or 4 hours really to get ready and trucks on the road by 7 a.m. and out the door in order to meet those SLAs. I think the other challenge they have, obviously, is around making all their routes efficient. We talk a lot about route optimization. We've got some fantastic tools at Descartes to do that. But it's a really key part of it. I mean, to try and keep those costs down, but more effectively to work the workforce in such a way that they can basically get every minute out of every person's day delivering parcels. And of course, dealing with all the on-road exceptions that we all experience now that things are a lot more consumer focused. Things have changed. Obviously, last year we stopped taking signatures, for home deliveries, but still running into situations with closed businesses or damaged goods or shorts and things like that. And especially now, not sure where you are, but we're just going into the lockdown right now because of the pandemic. So we're seeing a lot of businesses who have product in transit that won't be there to receive. So, how does a driver deal with all of that? So it gets kind of complicated. And again, it's not to diminish what the rest of supply chain does. Obviously, there's complexities throughout, as you mentioned, but I think there's some special aspects of last mile.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of highlighted many of those. I mean, the volumes obviously, have been growing, and 2020 was kind of this unexpected surge that occurred. Then you've got, the customer expectations continue to get more. We've been kind of conditioned over the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to expect, free delivery, to expect 1 day, 2 day deliveries,
Yep.
and the like. So kind of balancing, these increased volumes, customer expectations, and then all of the, within a short time frame in terms of being able to effectively plan and execute on this. And then you have to deal with all the exceptions. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it does create for this, very, you got to be on your toes to succeed in this, in this environment. And of course, talking about this environment, you can't get around talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that it's had, across all aspects of supply chain management. So how has it affected? I know you kind of touched upon it a little bit here, but how has it affected or even transformed last mile delivery?
Well, it certainly tested all aspects of supply chain and the companies that we work with and how they do business, right? And even how their customers do business, right? So it kind of all rolls downhill. Don't need to go into all the details because we're all living it every day. But to your point, thanks to Amazon and other companies like them, they've certainly changed the world and set the bar pretty high, I think, to achieve. And not all companies that are in that last mile or even in supply chain in general, I don't think we're ready for it, even though we've had years to ramp up. And this year was really telling. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, 2020 was insane. Just to give you some color on it, at least with some of our customers that we've heard anecdotally, since probably about April, March, everything started to lock up. Given around April or so, we started seeing typical peak volumes. So, Christmas time volumes, stuff that we'd see from October through January, as an example, with, Black Friday and Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday and all this other good stuff. And that we're seeing this in the spring. And the reality is it carried through the summertime. And one of our customers coined the concept of super peak, which is really interesting, right? And it's just because they had no other way to label it. Their October through January this year were miles above expectations from a volume perspective. So although it's great from a business perspective, it created a lot of challenges, right? Just human resources, vehicles, to keep up with demand, obviously you have to have vehicles. If your fleet is fixed with X number of vehicles, and you want to take on that extra volume to deal with your customers' problems, you got to rent cars. Well, where are you going to get them? I think the car and truck rental business these days is probably doing really, really well. But hiring and training is probably one of the biggest issues. They've always had challenges bringing on partners and new hires for peak, but to have it done so early and so long has really been very interesting for a lot of them. It's kind of interesting to see how they're managing through it. And I'd say for the most part, our customers have managed really well through it. They've been able to flex their way through the problems and come out successful.
It's interesting. I mean, you brought up kind of the human element of this, right? I mean, you kind of read the news articles that, such and such carrier is hiring 50,000, 100,000, whatever the number is, some very large number of folks, but we can talk about the volumes, we can talk about the number of deliveries, but ultimately, there's people involved. And to your point, I mean, bringing on all those folks, training them, getting them, into the system, if you will, and part of the process is one of those areas that it's behind the scenes for most folks, but is a critical factor, for success here. I think the other thing that we saw this past year was, you actually saw a lot of these carriers telling their customers saying, hey, we're going to limit, the number of pickups that we're going to do in order to kind of level our capabilities, right? Because we just can't take everything all at once. And that created a lot of challenges for shippers as they're trying to figure out, okay, well, they're going to meet my commitments, but they're not going to go beyond what their commitments were, or at least not that much beyond. So how do I navigate through this? I mean, do you think we're going to have another, super peak, as you called it, season, again this year? And what actions can the industry take to better manage, this growth in shipping volume and capacity demand?
Well, all I can do is speculate, like all of us. My crystal ball isn't always right on the money, but I think from my perspective, I would think yes. I think we're going to have another super peak. What I'm not clear on is just how long it's going to last, or if the volumes are going to be the same. I suspect it will be in 2021 and probably tailing off in 2022. Given the advent of vaccines and things like that, where people can kind of get back to somewhat normal. But I think what's good for the industry, though, is that as consumers, all of us, you, me, everyone watching, we've all been reconditioned. And to your point earlier, right? The bar has been set, and we've seen the opportunity now in front of us to get what we need without leaving home, or just the convenience of it, and so on. That's good for the industry, as far as I'm concerned. It's good for everyone involved. So I think there will be some decline, just because people are going to want to get out of the house and get back to brick and mortar, me included. But at the same time, I mean, this new reality of ours is taking hold. How they're going to deal with it, I think, and what we're seeing in with our customers right now, and what we encourage is co-opetition. That old saying. So it's really couriers working with maybe their competitors, smaller companies that do have capacity and may not have those larger contracts with the Amazons of the world or others, and really become partners, right? There's a lot of opportunity on both sides. We've got some very large couriers that have a whole fleet of agents. One of them's got, I think, north of 35 different companies they work with just in Canada alone to deliver excess load that they just can't get to with their thousands and thousands of other vehicles and full-time employees. So I think that's a really big deal as far as flexing. And obviously you're going to need tools and technology to help support that, because that in itself gets complicated. And, I think ShipTrack from Descartes ties all that together really well. And we spent a lot of time and effort doing that for our customers, because it was a problem. Gone are the days of clipboards and paper. And to your point also, it's again about the SLAs and the conditioning that we're set as consumers. We all want to know what's going on right now. Like when I press that button, I want to see some sort of notification saying, "Hey, we got your order. Oh, by the way, your order's on a truck, or by the way, your truck is in your neighborhood," or what have you. It's really difficult to do that if you are kind of that parent courier, one of the big three, for example, or what have you, to get that information from your third-party agents. Your typical competitors, right? You're typically not on the same network, same systems, or sharing paper and that sort of thing. And you need it now for customer care. So that's been one of the big obstacles, and we've solved that for our customers, which is really great. So I think, as these last mile providers are trying to meet the demand of the shippers, I think this is the only way they're going to survive well and meet those SLAs as well, right?
That's a great point. I mean, this whole concept of co-opetition. I mean, I think obviously it's like everything else, every challenge creates opportunities. I think this is also perhaps an opportunity for a lot of startups to perhaps come to market, from a regional standpoint, to, stand up, delivery operations, and create these partnerships and these relationships with, some of the bigger guys to, take on some of those responsibilities. But you're right. I mean, there's the actual physical movement of the goods and the passing along of the order, or passing along the manifest, or whatever the case might be. But then there's also the flow and the integration of data and information, across these parties, that needs to be, considered and addressed, right? And certainly that's where technology, comes in, which basically leads me to my next question. I mean, a lot of everything we just talked about, I mean, how can technology help the industry respond effectively to, these new market conditions?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Well, to your last point, the flow of data, I think, is, I won't say more important, but just as important as delivering the goods, right? And simply because of, again, reconditioning, but more than that, I mean, people like to get paid, right?
Even though it's free delivery, right?
Yeah, exactly. Free fuel, free insurance, free everything, right? So, this is technology is really necessary, especially in these kinds of volumes and the demands. I mean, some of these routes are hundreds of stops, and to have somebody in a clipboard doing that, I don't see how it's practical anymore. And the time it takes to reconcile all that sort of stuff. So the data is super important, but the data is all really important to our customers. Whether it's a retailer or what any other type of shipper, they need to know that their stuff is all reconciled properly. So they might release billing or customer care follow-ups or what have you. So all of that is super important. Basically we take pride in enabling our customers to kind of meet this demand and being able to manage the business. We try and give them as much information as we can so they can make informed decisions about, what to do next in the business, or, what I need to hire this week, and that's it, and so on. And there's a lot more work being done to try and put a little bit of artificial intelligence in there so we can kind of get that crystal ball working the way it really should. It's my dream to have predictive reports that are going to tell a manager or an owner of a company exactly how many people he's going to need tomorrow based on, weather and traffic and all these other assumptions that we're going to have. And so our team's working really hard on that today. I think the other thing too is, whatever technology couriers implement, I think it's got to be done right. I think there needs to be proper time invested to look at it, and understand how the technology can automate where possible, and humanize where necessary, is, one saying. And to that end, we can't forget that humans also have to have a fantastic experience with this technology, right? The technology might be awesome, but if your users don't want to use it because it's too bulky or too many things, too many clicks, too many whatever, they're just not going to use it. And that has a whole trickle effect downstream. We've seen some great advances with some of our clients. We had one in the East Coast that onboarded just middle of last year. And we look at things like scan compliance. In other words, are people doing their job? Are they scanning a box many times they need to, through all the different processes and steps in delivery? And they were averaging, low 80 percentile, give or take. So that means almost 20% of the workers weren't doing what they expected them to do, so that billing is correct and customer care is satisfied, all this other stuff. And, we saw within 3 weeks that number went right up to 97%. And it's simple psychology. If it's interesting to use and it's not onerous for me to use, I'll use it. And on top of that, we've also put some other things in to entice them to use it, because, once they receive an order, they can't move on to the next one without completing that workflow. So, there's little things. It's a give and take on both sides. And then I guess the third side of the wheel is really the consumers, the consignees and the shippers, right? They need that data as well. So having the technology fully integrated to be able to work with not only my drivers, but my partners, my co-opetition partners, my customers, i.e. the shippers, and their consignees, their customers. I think it's super, super critical to have all of that bound in one view, or one pane of glass, as it were. And that's what we do. And we're very, very proud of it. And I think it's making a huge impact on some of our customers. And I'm thrilled to death watching customers that are, start with us, as small companies, a couple of dozen trucks, what have you, and then work their way up to 50, 60,000 pieces a day moving through their fleet. For me, that's fantastic. And that's a true story of one of our clients, last 6 years, and we've seen them grow, and they've got huge marquee clients. And, I don't want to take credit, obviously, because they're the ones doing the work, but I think we do have something to do with it, because they're using our technology as part of their responses to RFPs and so on. So the technology is really helping them win business and then running the business.
A lot of great points there. I mean, the last example there. I mean, I think it kind of underscores a great point that in order for particularly some of these smaller players to grow and scale their business profitably,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to need technology to do that. I mean, there's only so much you can do with paper-based processes, Excel spreadsheets, and so forth. It's just very difficult to scale, that way. I think the other thing, as you were talking about all these different examples, I mean, I think it's very easy sometimes to think about, well, it's a route optimization and planning, right? Which obviously is a key, is a core component to it. But when you think about the whole end-to-end process here of last mile delivery, that's just one component of it, right? When
Yep.
you think about the whole workflow, then, that's really almost like the beginning aspect of it, because then you've got everything that happens once those trucks leave. You've got all the workflow that the driver is responsible for. So you're talking about mobile technology now. You're talking about mobile apps. You're talking about scanning. You're talking about telematics and GPS, and then you're talking about communication collaboration tools in terms of notifications, ETAs, and so on and so forth. So there's so much that goes into this key piece that I think the initial thought is, hey, route planning optimization, which again is highly critical in this whole aspect of it, but it's really in many ways just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Agreed. It's all got to work together, right? And I got to be honest with you, part of the real attractiveness of Descartes before we joined the business was looking at their portfolio of tools that that do things that we don't do, and we do things they don't do. And now we've integrated the technologies together to work harmoniously together. Because to your point, all of those are really important pieces. And you're going to have different communities within that career. They're going to require different types of information. And the fleet guys are going to want to know where the vehicles have been, and how the health of the vehicles are, so they can proactively work on them. You've got the finance guys who are counting every penny, both in and out, all over the map, which includes vehicles, which includes routing, which includes labor, third-party partners, all of this stuff. And you know what? If that data is disjointed or coming in from different streams, and it's up to the individuals to kind of sort through it all and glue it together themselves, it works. And that's the way we've done things for many, many years. But to have it under kind of all jammed together and working together and harmoniously sharing data amongst those systems, I think that's key. I mean, those are now substantial pieces of information that you can now make business decisions on, right? And if you have to go hunt for it, you'll get there. It'll just take a whole lot longer. So.
Right. Yeah. So I think one of the key takeaways is really looking at it, very holistically and from an end-to-end process, standpoint. Shawn, as a way to wrap up, then, I mean, when it comes to last mile, delivery, I mean, what capabilities do you see will ultimately separate the leaders from the laggards moving forward?
Well, when we're talking in the context of couriers and T&L companies, I think their ability to flex to meet the demand with really not a lot of time to plan, right? We talked about that at the beginning with couriers, and they have 4 to 5 hours really to get their act together overnight before trucks roll. So, I think for them to take advantage of this, I'll call it, the bull market we're in today, if you will. It's not going to last forever, I hope, from a health perspective. But it will be there, and I think when things kind of come back to normal, there's going to be a time for companies that now need to go hunt for business and be able to take on new jobs and new customers, really efficiently. But if they can't flex very well, I mean, that's a challenge. So looking at the partners, the co-opetition type of thing we talked about, with companies that actually have capacity to deliver, those goods, I think is super important. And whether it's seasonal or not, that's part of the game. I think also, gathering the data and sharing shipments electronically, and again, bringing these partners into the fold, so that it's completely transparent to shippers and consignees that there may be 2 or 3 different companies involved in moving your product, even though you only have one label on the box, right? It should be completely transparent to them. Nobody needs to know that, and frankly, it has to be transparent to the business as well, the people with the label on that box, that brand, because again, they don't want to be dealing with all these different moving parts. So if we can kind of keep it all together, I think it makes a big difference. And the other thing I'd say here is, as well, is just getting information in real time for the consignees. Again, we're conditioned this way. We're in an instant community now, an instant world. We want to see stuff happening, and so getting the right tools in place to do that. I think the other things too, companies that are able to offer both dedicated and conjunctive fleets to satisfy their clients and the different clients that come to bear. I know that some of them, like in Amazon, for instance, in certain cases will ask for a dedicated fleet, and others will ask for conjunctive, or don't really care, if you will. So you can put multiple vendors' products on the same truck. That flexibility, I think, is super important as well. And again, part of that is also managing all those pieces, those loads on those vehicles. And at the end of the day, like I've said a few times already, I think great technology just to pull all this together that employees love to use, and has the flexibility to configure to suit the changing business needs. I mean, in no time like this year, it's critical. And so, if I can offer any advice, I mean, look at your prospective vendors and challenge them on use cases and so on. I'd say open up the kimono, if you will, and let vendors like ourselves in to actually look at your business, how you do it, versus maybe come to assumptions of how you think it should be done. You might be surprised. And I'm not just talking on our behalf, but any company in our position should have lots of experience, lots of other customers' experience to pull on, that we might be able to share with you, provide some insights that you might not necessarily realize. And that's just from being in the business for so long and dealing with so many customers in so many different scenarios. So we're pretty excited by where we're at, and we love to help our customers grow. So we're excited.
A lot of great points there again. And the last part, I think, is something that I've seen, certainly become more common over the past few years, is where, companies are looking at their technology partners as partners,
Yeah.
and really looking at them not only from a technology standpoint, but looking at them as a source of human IP, as a source of knowledge and insights and advice that can provide that additional value in terms of what are some of the leading practices out there, or how can I be doing things differently, right? Tell me what I don't know already,
Yeah. Don't
so that I
upset.
can, yeah, so I can improve my business. So
Yeah.
again, Shawn, like I always say at the end of our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics, but you provided some great insights and perspective on last mile delivery. So again, thank you very much for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Appreciate it.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Descartes website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Shawn, you can post it there. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.